What's up guys, it's Legend X Rona, and today I'm doing a video that I've wanted to do for a long time now, and that's discussing the whole Mortal Kombat X timeframe and explaining where the Mortal Kombat comics fit into it and why the comics should at least be considered semi-canon. Now since I've been doing things like my theory videos and my topic videos, I've had so many people ask me things like, why did this happen in the game story, when did this happen, or when did that happen, and I even had some people tell me that they don't think that the comics are canon. So in this video, I'll be explaining where all the pieces of the Mortal Kombat X game story fit into the Mortal Kombat X timeframe along with the comics. And I'll also be making connections that will show why I think that the comics should at least be considered semi-canon. Now in order to do this, I will be doing a quick rundown of each event that took place in the time frame from the very beginning, all in order. So let's go ahead and start with the very first event that took place in the very beginning.
It is as Master Boraicho said. The Shaolin Masters are aboard that ship.
Now since this is a chapter in the Mortal Kombat X game, I thought I would go ahead and mention it. The first two acts of Raiden's chapter in the Mortal Kombat X game was based 25 years ago when the events of Mortal Kombat 2 during the Mortal Kombat 9 game had just begun. Raiden, Liu Kang, and Kung Lao were striking back at Shao Kahn's forces after they had attacked the Wuxi Academy, and this is actually a scene that takes place in the Mortal Kombat 9 game during the first and second act of Jax's chapter. Now I know that some of you might be thinking, well, why do they have on different clothes? Well, honestly, I guess they didn't feel the need to recreate all the same costumes that they had in Mortal Kombat 9. And I know that like Scorpion did have like the same skin that he had in Mortal Kombat 9, but I guess they didn't feel the need to recreate all the same skins for each character. But all in all, this flashback was basically just to show Raiden's connection with Liu Kang and Kung Lao and how they were like sons to him during the time of these events. The first chapter of the Mortal Kombat X game is pretty much what starts the whole Mortal Kombat X timeframe. The events of this chapter are actually the alternate events of Mortal Kombat 4 in the original timeline, with the events that take place after being the effects of things being altered. Now during this chapter we get to see the war between Earthrealm and Netherrealm and how the defenders of Earthrealm were able to fight off Shinnok and his forces. Due to Johnny's unique powers that allows him to be able to fight the Elder Gods themselves, allowed him to be able to best Shinnok in combat, and gave Raiden the opportunity to seal Shinnok within his own amulet. Now this is probably the most important chapter because it's why mostly everything else that happens from here on out. It's why the main plot of the comics take place, and it's the main plot also for the Mortal Kombat X game itself. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail with it because I know most of you already have played this and know exactly what happens, but this is pretty much what starts the whole time frame and leads to the events that follows.
Nope, no evil sorcerers in here.
Would you get serious?
Now the first three acts of Sonya's chapter explains what happened right after Johnny Cage had defeated Shinnok. During this chapter we see Sonya and Johnny take on Quan Chi, Sub-Zero, Jax, and Scorpion, and during this scene where Johnny almost died after Jax had stabbed him in the back, we actually get to see how the Revenants are created. Had Johnny had died in the scene, his soul would have been put into this new body that was being created and he would have became a Revenant. But before this could happen, Raiden came in and tried to counter Quan Chi's magic to prevent him from turning Johnny into a Revenant. This caused Quan Chi's spell to be reversed and reverted Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Jax back to the living. Now this was a crucial part of what happened during the time frame because all of these characters play a very important role to the plot of the story. After Sonya's chapter, the events that we all see in the Mortal Kombat X comics finally take place. The comics are a really important part of what happened in the time frame because it explains a lot of why things were the way that they were in the Mortal Kombat X game. All things that happened with Scorpion and his new clan, Sub-Zero and the Cyber Lin Kuei, the war between Mileena and Kotal Khan, how Shinnok's amulet came into play, and why there's a non-aggression pact between Earthrealm and Outworld, all of it took place during the comics and are explained. Now I don't want to go into too much detail with the comics because a lot happened during the comics, but I will talk about certain parts that played roles into the Mortal Kombat X game later on in the video. Now these next four events all happen either at the same time or around the same time due to it being unclear because each of them happened 5 years before the events of the Mortal Kombat X game.
I know things about Melina. Her troubled rule will fall in the telling, and pave the way for Guatal.
The first act of the Devore's chapter explains the events of how Kotal Khan gained the throne from Melina. With the help of Devore, Reptile, and Ermac, Kotal Khan was able to subdue Melina and exile her as he took over the throne. Now this is a very important part of the story because after this we see the events of Melina and her rebellion trying to take back the throne during the Mortal Kombat X story, which is the main focus of the 2nd, 4th, and 6th chapter of the game. After the events of the comics, the first act of Takeda's chapter shows Takeda finishing his training with the Shirai Ryu and becoming Chujin 5 years before the events of the Mortal Kombat X game. After not seeing his father since the very first chapter of the Mortal Kombat X comics, he's finally reunited with him, though Takeda is not pleased with the fact that he left him somewhere unknown for 10 years. After hearing how his mother was actually murdered by the Red Dragon clan and how he was placed in Scorpion's care for protection and guidance, he finally resolves his issues with his father and joins him in his fight against the Red Dragon clan. During the third act of Kung Jin's chapter, we get to see a bit of his backstory before him joining the Shaolins 5 years before the Mortal Kombat X game. Now this part of the chapter helps you understand Kung Jin and his past a bit more. Feeling sorry for his cousin Lao's death, we see Kung Jin sneak into Raiden's Sky Temple and steal his family's memento back from Raiden. Now after fighting Raiden and hearing them talk, we actually find out the part of Kung Jin's past that bothers him the most. In this scene, we actually find out that Kung Jin is indeed a gay character and that that's the reason why he feels that the Shaolins won't accept him. Now thanks to Raiden though, he convinces him that he can redeem himself as a thief by just going to the Shaolin Temple and joining them so he can make something of himself. Now this is the major role into the story because this is the reason why Kung Jin is the way that he is and why he becomes a better character. The third act of Scorpion's chapter was very important because we see how Scorpion and Sub-Zero finally come to terms with each other after their long iconic rivalry and make peace with one another. Sub-Zero invites Scorpion to the Lin Kuei to discuss things and explain the misguided hate between the two. We then see Frost try to stop this meeting between them, leading Scorpion of course to believe that Sub-Zero is only deceiving him, but finds out that he truly invited him to make peace between them. After stopping Frost from interrupting, Sub-Zero informs Scorpion about what he learned from Sector's Cyber Reserve memories, and Scorpion finally finds out that Quan Chi was the one to kill everyone in his clan, which plays a major part in the Mortal Kombat X game. Now being fully informed, Scorpion and Sub-Zero finally have peace with each other and have now ended their fierce rivalry.
I love you.
Dad?
So you are the issue of Johnny Cage. Fitting that I exterminate his entire line.
If you want him, you're gonna go through me.
Finally, we have the events of the Mortal Kombat X game, which happens after all the previous events listed. Everything that happens in the game starting at Kotal Khan's chapter minus the flashbacks are the events that take place after the comics. Cassie, Jackie, Kung Jin, and Takeda are now a team who play the main role in saving Earthrealm. Kotal Khan and Melina are still going through war, with Kotal Khan finally taking out Melina with the aid of Earthrealm, and Shinnok returning and almost taking over Earthrealm but defeated by Cassie, who shares the same power as her father who beat Shinnok before her. Now I don't want to go into too much detail with the game because I'm pretty sure all y'all have already played it, but this is pretty much what ends the Mortal Kombat X Timeframe.
That you? Nice.
And that's pretty much where the whole time frame fits in with the order of events. The comics pretty much explain a lot of what led to many of the events in the Mortal Kombat X game and fits in all the pieces to most things we don't know based on playing the game alone. With that being said, there's a lot of people who actually think that the comics aren't canon or are on the fence and accept the comic as a semi-canon series. Personally, I kind of see them as canon myself, but I understand why some people only believe it to be semi-canon, which is something that I will be discussing later on in the video. But I'm going to go ahead and connect the pieces and tell you guys why I think that the comic should at least be considered semi-canon.
You see it now, Raiden. Your legacy.
Now, throughout the Mortal Kombat X comics, they constantly make references back to things that happened during and after the NetherRealm War. In Chapter 1, Scorpion mentions how he sought out warriors who lost their families during the NetherRealm War to join the new Shirai Ryu. Also, Sub-Zero went after one of the Komudogu daggers that was located in the Red Dragon Temple, and a Red Dragon member mentioned to him how he had no connection to Quan Chi, which was him making the connection to how Sub-Zero was once controlled by Quan Chi. In Chapter 2, Raiden mentions how the NetherRealm invasion damaged the cosmic barriers that protect Earthrealm from other realms. In Chapter 5, Kotal Kahn tells Sonya that she promised to work with Outworld after the NetherRealm War. In Chapter 16, the fight that happened between Sonya, Johnny, and Raiden against Quan Chi, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Jax in Sonya's chapter in the Mortal Kombat X game is mentioned by Raiden and is also shown. In Chapter 20, Jax's wife Vera mentions how Jax came back to life, and also Havoc mentions how Johnny Cage defeated Shinnok. In Chapter 23, we see the scene after they beat Shinnok in the Mortal Kombat X game where Johnny was holding Sonya. In Chapter 30, Havoc mentions how it was impossible that a mortal like Johnny Cage was able to defeat an elder god such as Shinnok, and then in Chapter 32, he mentions how Raiden thought that there would be peace after they defeated Shinnok. So the constant references to the NetherRealm War shows the connections between the two stories and how the events of the NetherRealm War made an impact on what happened in the comics.
Why be worried about Outworld? I thought Kotal Kahn respected the Reiko Accords.
He does, but he's facing a civil war. The rebels win, those accords will be history.
In the Mortal Kombat X game, we often hear the characters speak of something called the Reiko Accords, which is a non-aggression pact that was formed due to the events that took place in the comics. After the main events that Reiko and Havoc caused in the Mortal Kombat X comics, Raiden, Sonya, and Kotal Kahn agreed to form a non-aggression pact that would prevent Earthrealm and Outworld from invading one another. Sonya then returns to the Special Forces base to let everyone know about this non-aggression pact. In the Mortal Kombat X game, they constantly refer to the Reiko Accords and discuss how the Accords are preventing them from any real invasion and how they respect this non-aggression pact. Cassie mentions it during the first chapter of the game, Kung Jin, Jackie, and Devora mentions it in the 4th chapter, and Kung Jin mentions it again in the 6th chapter. So it's obvious that these Accords that were created at the end of the comics due to the events of the comics played an important role in the Mortal Kombat X game. Without these Accords in place, things would be a lot different between Earthrealm and Outworld in the Mortal Kombat X game.
Let us take the amulet to the Elder Gods.
They cannot destroy it. No one can.
They might offer counsel. Shinnok can never escape.
After defeating Shinnok in the first chapter of the Mortal Kombat X game, Raiden and Fujin decide to take the amulet of Shinnok to the Elder Gods and see if they can provide answers on what they should do with the amulet. In the Mortal Kombat X comics in Chapter 11, they show exactly what happened when Raiden went to the Elder Gods and discussed what should become of the amulet. Not being able to destroy it, Raiden decides to hide its whereabouts with the powers of the Komudogu, which is later revealed by Havoc towards the end of the comics. After defeating Havoc in the comics, Raiden, Sonya, and Kotal Kahn discuss how they should deal with the amulet due to the use of deceit and the secrets of the Komudogu not working the way that Raiden thought it would. Kotal Kahn tells them that due to the war in Outworld, he can't promise the safety of the amulet, and Sonya tells them that the Special Forces will be able to take care of it and keep it safe. In the MKX game, we later find out that Kano found his way into the Special Forces base and stole it from Mileena. Upon finding this out, Kotal Kahn becomes enraged due to the Special Forces promising to keep the amulet safe, thus explaining his anger in Chapter 4 of the MKX game.
From you, Aztec fool. Kill him! This one serves Mileena no longer.
During the Mortal Kombat X game, we get to see the beginning of the war between Kotal Kahn and Mileena, and see how it all began when Kotal Kahn, Devora, Reptile, and Ermac turned against Mileena and Kotal Kahn took the throne. Now the same scene is also seen in chapter 19 of the comics, but it happened much different than what it did in the game. During the events of the Mortal Kombat X comics, we also see what happened once Mileena formed her rebellion and the war began. Based on the game alone, you don't know too much of what happened during this war unless you read the comics and see how much more bigger this war was than what we see in the game. Now this one's pretty interesting because I've personally always wondered how Sub-Zero got this scar. Now as we already know, there are two different Sub-Zeros in the Mortal Kombat universe. We have the older brother Sub-Zero, Bi-Han, who dies and becomes New Saibot, and we have the younger brother Sub-Zero, Kuei Liang, who is the current Sub-Zero that we play with in the games. Now if you've been playing Mortal Kombat since Mortal Kombat 3, you know that the biggest distinguishing fact between the two Sub-Zeros is that the younger brother Kuei Liang has a scar on his eye. Now I've always wondered how he got that, and in this new timeline they add story to how he got his scar. In the Mortal Kombat X comics, they showed that he actually got a scar when Kano cut his face with one of the cursed Kamidogu daggers. Now I thought this was pretty cool to see because now there's a whole story behind the scar that Sub-Zero has on his eye, and it connects to the Mortal Kombat X games because it shows how he got the scar and you can actually see it when you play as him in the games.
The others are restored to the living. By coupling Quan Chi's dark magics to my own, I was able to restore their souls.
As we saw in the Mortal Kombat X game during Sonya's chapter, we see how Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Jax became humans again when Raiden was able to counter Quan Chi's spell. In the Mortal Kombat X comics, the same scene actually happens, but it happens different than what it did in the game. During the Mortal Kombat X comics, we also see what happened to these three characters after they returned to the living and how they all affected the course of the game. Scorpion reformed the Shirai Ryu, which played a hand in Shinnok returning in the MKX game. Sub-Zero took down the Cyber Lin Kuei and reformed the Lin Kuei, which explains why Sector is dead, and it led him to find out the truth between the Shirai Ryu and the Lin Kuei, which caused Scorpion to kill Quan Chi. And Jax, he retired from the Special Forces and had Jackie, who plays a huge role in the MKX game, and he also played a role in helping the Earthrealm forces capture Quan Chi in Chapter 8 of the MKX game.
When I finally killed Sector, I discovered the Lin Kuei had not sacrificed its honor with the Cyber Initiative. We had abandoned it long before.
During Scorpion's chapter in the Mortal Kombat X game, Sub-Zero explains to Scorpion everything that happened to the Lin Kuei with the Cyber Initiative and how he fought and killed Sector to recreate his whole clan. In the Mortal Kombat X comics, they actually show how all this happened between Sub-Zero and Sector. During the comics, Sub-Zero was hunted down by the Lin Kuei cyborgs, but thanks to Baraicho and Kung Jin, Sub-Zero was able to hack into the Lin Kuei clan and reprogram the cyborgs to regain their humanity. This led Cyrax to turn on Sector and help Sub-Zero defeat Sector. After defeating Sector, Cyrax decided that the Lin Kuei would be better off starting anew, so he decided to self-destruct himself and take out the remaining Cyber Lin Kuei members. Now at the very end of the comics, we see Sub-Zero taking a bunch of new members including Frost, thus recreating the Lin Kuei clan. Now when Goro was first advertised with the slogan, "Goro lives," I don't think anyone understood it. In the Mortal Kombat X comics, we see how Kotal Kahn defeated Goro by cutting off all 4 of his arms and then left him to return to his home in shame. Due to this, after the death of his father, he was denied from taking the throne, so he decided to leave his home in order to find a way to get his arms back. We later see in the final scene of the comics that Goro has turned to Dagon to find a solution for his arms. Now, though we don't know how he got his arms back, because we haven't got to see the continuation in the comics just yet, we know that he does get them back, thus the slogan Goro Lives comes about. So this explains the whole Goro Lives slogan and explains to why he has all 4 of his arms in the Mortal Kombat X game.
You no longer hold sway over me. You will bathe in hellfire. I was forged in it.
Now, if you ever played with or against Quan Chi, you might wonder why sometimes in his intros he comes in with Moloch's head. Well, in chapter 34 of the MKX Comics, you see what happened to Moloch. After failing to bring back Scorpion, Quan Chi decided to rid himself of Moloch by having Katana cut off his head. This explains why Quan Chi is carrying Moloch's head in some of his intros and how he died, which you wouldn't know unless you read the comics.
She died in an accident.
That is the story I asked Master Hasashi to tell you. But in truth, your mother was killed by Red Dragon assassins. I was the target. Su-Chin was the victim.
During Takeda's chapter in the Mortal Kombat X game, Kenshi explains to Takeda what happened to his mother and why he left him with Hanzo. In the Mortal Kombat X comics, we see exactly what happened to Takeda's mother and how she was killed by the Red Dragon clan. After what happened, we see how Kenshi was trying to run from the Red Dragon and keep Takeda safe. Now, in order to keep Takeda safe, he takes him to Hanzo in order to protect him and also train him so one day he'll be prepared to join Kenshi in the fight against the Red Dragon clan. Now, before he leaves, he tells Hanzo to lie and tell Takeda that his mother's death was an accident so Takeda wouldn't go out and attack the Red Dragon clan unprepared. And that's pretty much all the connections I found between the Mortal Kombat X game and the comics. Personally, with all these connections, I can't see how you would think that the comics aren't canon. Now, I will agree that there are some plot holes between the comics and the story, which is pretty much why I'll go ahead and just call it semi-canon. But honestly, there's always going to be plot holes in any story, which tends to happen when the writers forget things, so it's pretty much expected. I'm sure that when writing the Mortal Kombat X comics and scripting the games, they might have had some kind of miscommunication at times, things they wanted to change in the comics, or even just them forgetting things that they might have already did or forgot to do. That's just a part of writing stories sometimes. Regardless, I do think that the comics were meant to be canon, even with the plot holes that it has. So many things are explained due to the comics, and there's so many connections that you just can't deny the comics and say that they aren't canon. With that being said, I will be doing a second part to this video. In the second part, I will be trying to address all the plot holes that I can find between the two stories and talking about each and every one of them. So if you have any plot holes that you want me to explain or discuss, feel free to leave them all in the comments below and I'll try to address them all. And be sure to leave any other comments you might have on the video also in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like. I would really appreciate it. I worked really hard on this video and had to go back through the comics in the game in detail just to make this video possible. Oh, and shout out to UnCAGEDgamez because looking at his reading reviews for the comics made it really enjoyable going back through them again. And if you guys could, please share this video with anyone who might need anything explained about the time frame or about the comics being canon. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at LegendXRonin and keep up with all things that I do with my channel. And if you're new to my channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button for all things Mortal Kombat. This is LegendXRonin and I'll see you guys later. Now, moving on to the final theory on the list, Rain will become the new ruler of Edenia. Now this is a theory that I've been thinking of for quite some time now. Okay, so currently as we know, the new timeline has now passed the events of what would be Mortal Kombat 4 in the old timeline.